Did he create one of the first androids? Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. The famous words of French philosopher and scientist and mathematician René Descartes. Descartes is often referred to as the father of modern philosophy. Not only did he argue about the nature of reality, the mind, and body, but he was also famous for building intricate automata. He loved clockwork dolls and mechanical creations. So, when his only daughter and child Francine died, he couldn't bear her loss. Descartes decided to build a mechanical replica indistinguishable from the girl. The story has a few versions, but most agree that this robot Francine traveled everywhere with him. She would sleep in a kind of casket next to his bed. In 1646, Christina of Sweden summoned Descartes to her castle and sent a ship for him. The casket went where he went, and at night he would take her out of her casket in his cabin and wind her up and talk to her. But it is said the ship had encountered bad weather, and the superstitious crew was getting spooked hearing the chatter in Descartes' room. Suspecting some kind of witchcraft, the crew broke into the philosopher's cabin, where he slept, opened the casket, and were horrified by what they found. And the captain tossed the automaton overboard because it, quote, worked well enough like a woman with a soul, meaning not very much, unquote. The second loss of his daughter proved fatal for Descartes because he died shortly after.
People don't feel safe anymore. Something so simple as going to the mall with your kids is like putting your life in danger. Over the weekend, this 40-year-old man began attacking random people with a knife in a mall in Sydney, Australia. It's clear that the attacker was targeting women because out of the 6 lives that were taken, 5 were women, except for the mall security guard who got in the way, and because of that, his life was also taken. Now, what happened to this specific woman really makes me think about all the mothers. This is 38-year-old Ash Good, and she was at the mall with her 9-month-old daughter when all this happened. Tragically, Ash was one of the victims and her life was taken as she tried to protect her daughter. Her baby was also wounded, but before Ash fell to the ground, she handed over her daughter to a stranger and begged for them to save her daughter's life. 9-month-old Harriet survived, but her mother didn't, and it makes me so sick that this child now has to grow up without her mother over something so senseless as this. The attacker continued to try to hurt people in the mall, but he was confronted by a police officer and they took him out. This is something that's been happening way too often now, and the fact that we have to be on edge when we're at the mall is insane.
The 3 towns in the USA with the most UFO sightings. Number 3, Rachel, Nevada. Located near the secretive Area 51 military base, Rachel experiences a high concentration of UFO sightings, averaging around 150 sightings annually. The town's proximity to classified government facilities fuels speculation about extraterrestrial activity. Number 2, Sedona, Arizona. Known for its stunning red rock formations, Sedona has become a hotspot for UFO sightings due to its clear desert skies and minimal light pollution. With over 200 reported sightings annually, locals and tourists alike flock to this mystical town in hopes of catching a glimpse of extraterrestrial activity. Before revealing the number 1, remember to subscribe and like the video. Number 1, Roswell, New Mexico. Renowned for the infamous Roswell UFO incident of 1947, this small town continues to be a magnet for UFO enthusiasts. With an average of 300 reported sightings per year, Roswell embraces its extraterrestrial fame with UFO-themed attractions and museums, drawing in visitors from around the globe.
I'm gonna die on the hill that morale is the most important factor for deciding who's going to win the battle or war. Not equipment, not training, morale. Or as Rand likes to put it, the will to fight. This is a 2019 study. Governments are still trying to figure out the best way to encourage their troops to keep fighting. The graph behind me here shows all the times the United States included the will to fight in their field service regulations, or their doctrine. Notice how World War I, Vietnam, and the Iraq War didn't include the will to fight in their doctrine. And look what happened there. Crazy. High morale and the will to fight are also the core pillars of guerrilla warfare, and the Vietnamese and the Taliban both showcase this. Even if you're just fighting with sticks and stones, if you want to fight and the enemy doesn't, you win. Period. Morale was so important, even the CIA had their fingers in it. They knew how important it was, and they knew that the North Vietnamese army would never break, and they tried to get US policymakers to make some changes. But they didn't, and we saw how that all played out. Your average unit with your average morale is going to break around 10 to 30% casualties. This also applied to great medieval battles in the past. If you start seeing people around you dying, your life preservation instincts are going to kick in and you are going to rout. Funny enough, one of the best things you can do for morale for your troops is just provide them with an endless supply of coffee and cigarettes, and this has been true for over 100 years now. People love coffee and cigarettes. Keeps the spirits good.
Remember the time when Japan almost caused an extinction level event? No! Well, it almost happened during World War II. The plan was called Operation Cherry Blossoms that night. Japan planned to use submarines to launch planes that would then drop the Black Plague on the west coast of the United States. This man, Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, was the mastermind behind this plan. He also worked alongside Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, the man behind Unit 731. And they weren't just going to release the Black Plague. They had other diseases in mind, like cholera, typhus, and the dengue fever. They planned to drop it over cities like San Francisco, San Diego, and Los Angeles. What's even crazier was that the submarine crews were also expected to infect themselves and then come ashore to then infect everybody else. It was a mission. By March 1945, the plan was ready to go. But this guy, General Yoshijiro Mizu, opposed it. He argued that using biological weapons turned the war into a battle against all of humanity, saying that Japan will earn the derision of the world. The opposition was so strong that it stopped the operation before it even started, but it's still a scary thought.
This 24-year-old teacher was kissing her 5th grade student during school hours. This all came to light when the boy's mother overheard her 11-year-old son speaking on the phone with Madison Bergman, her son's teacher. She felt like something was off, so she went through her son's text messages and found inappropriate conversations between them and then reported it to the school. And the 5th grader told investigators everything. He said that him and Madison spoke on the phone almost every day and that he got her number during a ski trip. And get this, Madison got engaged with her longtime boyfriend on the same day she attended this ski trip with this child. They found out that the essay was going on during lunchtime and after school. Investigators also found disturbing notes inside Madison's backpack between her and this student where they constantly talked about kissing. They even found text messages where Madison admitted that she loved him so much but needed to stop talking to him because she knew it was wrong. She was supposed to get married in July, but obviously that's not happening, and she was arrested and charged with child SA and was released on a $25,000 bond.
I got to visit 4 different horror filming sites, so let's talk about how that went. The first stop on my journey, you guessed it, was the Michael Myers house. This house was actually saved from being bulldozed a few years ago and is relocated to Pasadena, where now it actually operates as an office. They don't want you going inside or anything, but right next door is this cute little shop that shows horror movies, and they're definitely getting into the Halloween theming. The second stop was Laurie Strode's house from the original Halloween. This is actually currently just someone's house. A family owns it, and they love the fact that it's known for the Halloween franchise. Me and my friend Brian from B-Star Cinema were having a wonderful time in front of this house, just goofing around, having the time of our lives. And the family who owns this house leaves out this pumpkin for people to take pictures with. Then we stop by the iconic Halloween hedge from the first movie. As you can see, Brian and I are having a wonderful time here. There's actually a divot in the grass from where people just stand there to take their photos and videos. It's kind of funny. But nothing around to show that it's from the Halloween house. It's only if you know, you know. And then finally, my last stop was the American Horror Story Murder House, which is just someone's house, and it's a lot bigger in person, and that's how.
When you're driving into Branson, Missouri, there's this valley in these Ozark Hills, and there's a row of mansions, all abandoned.
Ew.
Literally never lived in, just wide open
Where's this?
mansions right outside of Branson, Missouri. It's an eerie sight, especially when there's the fog in the lower valley, and they're really pretty houses, but it's just all grown up. It's weeds and trees all around them, and it's
so weird.
It's scary,
It's
Because I'd rather live in a cardboard box in Florida than a mansion in Branson, Missouri.
Shout out to all of our Branson, Missouri fans.
I just remember when we went there
Branson's
and I was
great.
just like,
You went there in January.
the
Of course you
vibe.
did.
Like nobody was doing anything. There were people anywhere.
It's literally the Las Vegas of the Midwest, and you went there during their off season. That's why. Missouri in the wintertime is terrible.
How the FBI is like constantly warning us that there is an imminent cyber attack that is
Yeah, I
about to
keep
happen
hearing
from-
about it. What's going on with that?
Someone from Congress said that there is a imminent threat that threatens national security that is classified, and they're trying to get President Biden to declassify it. And what came out was last week, Russia launched a rocket into space, and this satellite thing that they put into space has nuclear capabilities on it.
Cool.
This teenager catfished and groomed a young boy before luring him to his flat and brutally murdering him. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Breck Bednar. Breck was a 14-year-old boy living in Surrey with his mum Lauren and his triplet siblings. He was described as affectionate, kind, caring, intelligent, and he had such a passion for all things electronics, computers, and online gaming. It was from online gaming that Breck sadly crossed paths with 18-year-old Lewis Danes. Lewis owned a server which he allowed many younger boys to play on, and they would all get quite close, spending hours at a time gaming together. Lewis fabricated a story about his life, telling these young boys that he lived in New York City, that he worked for the US government in the Secret Service, and that he owned his very own successful computing business. In reality, Lewis was an unemployed 18-year-old boy living alone in a small flat in Essex. He had been abandoned by both of his parents and spent a few years in and out of foster care before finally beginning to live independently in this Essex flat when he was 16 years old. Some of the boys in the server saw through Lewis and saw through his web of lies, but if they ever called him out or mentioned anything, Lewis would kick them out or block them from the server. Breck was not one of these boys, and he took everything that Lewis said at face value and believed every word he said. Lauren grew concerned over Breck's relationship with Lewis. His behaviour was changing, he started to refuse to go to church, he would argue back with his mum, and he just became very moody and reserved. Lauren actually contacted the police and told them that she believed that her son was being groomed online, but seemingly nothing came from this report. She started to crack down on Breck's screen time, she forbade him from playing with Lewis on his server and basically told him to cut off the friendship. However, as many people Breck's age would do when their parents say they're not allowed to do something, he didn't listen, he done it anyways, and he just began to be more sneaky about it. In February 2014, Breck told his mum Lauren that he was going over to a friend's house. Breck went outside and he jumped into a taxi that Lewis had ordered for him and made his way over to Lewis's flat. He went to Lewis's flat under the ruse that Lewis was going to teach him more about computers because Lewis apparently intended to pass Breck on his successful fake computer business. We don't really know the events of what happened from this night into the next day. However, at one point, Breck was bound with duct tape by his wrists and his ankles before having his throat deeply slit by Lewis, ultimately killing him. Lewis then took photos of Breck, who was dying, and sent them to his friends. One of Breck's sisters actually found out what happened over text. And at this point, Lauren was already beside herself in worry as she had got a text from Breck's dad saying that Breck had not turned up at his house like he was supposed to. The next morning, Lewis rang the police. He starts off the call by telling the operator, quote, "I need police and a forensics team to my address. My friend and I got into an altercation and I'm the only one who came out alive." When police arrive at the flat, they find Breck's lifeless body lay on the bedroom floor. His bloody clothes are stuffed into a black bag, and some of Lewis's computing equipment is found in this sink, which has got water in it, in an attempt to try and destroy some evidence. Lewis is then arrested for the murder of Breck Bednar. During the investigation, it was found that Lewis had actually purchased some duct tape, some condoms, and a syringe only a couple of days before the murder happened, which showed some sort of premeditation. Initially, Lewis tried to claim that Breck's murder was an accident. However, at his pre-trial hearing, he did plead guilty. He would go on to be sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years to serve, meaning that he could potentially get out when he's in his 40s. Although we don't know for sure what the motive was behind Breck's murder, it is speculated that it was sexually motivated due to evidence that was found. We also now know that 3 years before the murder, Lewis had actually been accused of raping another young boy and having possession of indecent images of minors, but for some reason he was never investigated or prosecuted for any of these. In the time since Breck's murder, Lauren has been advocating for tighter online laws. She goes to school and talks to children, telling them about the importance of online safety and sharing Breck's story. And she also set up something called the Breck Foundation. Breck's family have sadly been the target of trolls over the years, one of the most recent instances being in 2019 when one of his young sisters got a message from someone that was threatening to smash up and break Breck's headstone.
This man committed mass murder because he was attracted to trees. He It was the 10th of November 2010 in Apple Valley, Ohio. I believe the date from this photo is actually incorrect and the camera was set wrong. Now, the neighborhood was a quiet one and things out of the ordinary rarely happened. That was until emergency services received a disturbing phone call. Local Dairy Queen manager rang to report 32-year-old Tina Herman as missing. The single mum had failed to show up for work, which was incredibly unusual. She was a great mum to 13-year-old Sarah and 11-year-old Cody pictured here. Police started doing some digging and figured out that Tina and her boyfriend Greg had actually been having problems. Her friend told police that she was actually due to move out of the house. Officers went round to the property to see if anything was wrong. Now, frustratingly, they didn't actually go in and they couldn't really see anything was up. However, they were a little bit unnerved to be told that the children had never turned up at school. The following day, Tina's manager decided to take matters into her own hands. She went into Tina's house and discovered a horrific scene. She rang police, frantically shouting that there was blood everywhere. Disturbingly, there were 3 pools of blood and drag marks along the floor. The bath had blood in that was 2 inches deep. However, there were 2 sets of footprints on the floor in blood, one seemingly matching young Sarah's footprints. Did this mean she got out alive? Now, police interviewed Tina's boyfriend, who seemingly had an alibi. He was actually at work, and this alibi checked out. Now, investigators started looking into the bin bags and tarp that were found at Tina's home. Turned out that these had been purchased from a local Walmart. Now, Walmart reported that somebody did actually purchase those items around midnight. They identified the male on CCTV and traced his car in the car park. He was Matthew Hoffman. He was a local man who'd also been charged with burglary previously. A SWAT team showed up at his house and arrested him. Shockingly, they found Sarah tied up and gagged under a pile of leaves in the cellar. The poor child told officers that her and her brother had been ambushed by the random man when they came home from school. He had tied up the young girl and SA'd her. Horrifically, Matthew admitted to police that he'd killed Tina and her son, as well as her friend Stephanie. Now, Stephanie was Tina's friend who'd simply gone round to try and help her move out. Matthew hid the dead bodies in a hollow tree. A psychologist stated that it was likely that Matthew had dendrophilia, a S attraction to trees. This would also explain all of the leaves in the house. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Tom Devlin has a new film out called The After Dark. It's vampires, it's punk rock, and it's the film debut of one of my favorite musicians, Lars Frederiksen from Rancid. Let's talk about it, and don't forget to hit that follow button for daily horror movie content. Beth, a young vampire, meets Jack, a punk rock vampire. Their clans clash as Beth's clan opposes her embracing Jack's party lifestyle. So first of all, shout out to my friend Teddy for keeping me updated on the release of this one. I appreciate you, brother. So this is a low-budget, independent horror film that feels like a punk rock Romeo and Juliet or West Side Story. It has a very DIY feel to it and has that Tom Devlin charm to it. If you've seen his other movies, then you probably know what I'm talking about. Now, whether you love or hate this film, there's no denying that it looks like it was an absolute blast for the cast and crew to make, and I personally had a lot of fun with it. Now, I of course wish it was a little more bloody and gory, but it has a killer soundtrack and a gnarly vibe to it. It's not my favorite Tom Devlin movie, but I appreciate it for what it is, and I'm going to need a physical copy of it. It's currently streaming on Tubi if you'd like to check it out for yourself. If you've seen The After Dark, then let me know what you think of it in the comments. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Is the horror film 8 Eyes a tale about the United States having to confront their sins? Maybe. But I'll tell you one thing that's for certain, and that's that 8 Eyes is a wild fucking ride that wears its exploitation influences on its sleeves. And I'm not saying that in a negative connotation either, because this film is just a massive throwback and homage to these grimy 70s exploitation films. The film follows this married couple named Cass and Gav as they vacation in Europe and come across this man at a wedding. It turns out that this man, known as St. Peter, has hidden sinister intentions. Now, we do get a little bit of tonal whiplash around the midpoint of the film, but honestly, that's when the film turns into like a full-blown psychedelic gory story for survival. Now, I don't think this is going to be a film for everyone, especially because it does get a little confusing, but regardless, I had so much fun with this film. And you can definitely bet this is going to be a film I'm going to be picking up through Vinegar Syndrome, since their pre-orders are currently live. 8 Eyes is set to drop on Shudder in September.
The very controversial, some would say manipulative, toxic, abuser, manipulator, narcissistic pastor J.P. Miller.
We're not going to do an altar call today. Instead, I'm going to have you stand up and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can. So y'all can stand to your feet. before I make the announcement, I also want to say that my request to you is that you will continue to come to church and serve and give for the next little bit. 'Cause I don't want to have. I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks. I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. Y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And she wasn't. Y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her.
It was such an emotionless, bizarre announcement. And he plays a clip of her singing, and he starts doing this odd combination where he's laughing and crying, where he's like, like it's really, I don't know how to describe it. I can only play it for you. It's just weird.
Imagine being married to that. It was like that in our house all the time.
Side note, he does mention trying to resurrect her from the dead while visiting her body.
I thought I raised her from the dead. She's alive, I can't wait to see her again one day.
Does he look sad?
No, in my opinion, no. He looks like he loves performing on stage.
How many people is in that church?
Prior to all of this happening, it was said that he had 2 sermons on Sundays and a total of around 700 people would come.
Whoa.
This is all the news you're not going to see on TV today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. The OceanGate co-founder is now claiming that he can safely put humans on Venus. I'm not saying anything about this. A new study has now revealed that hippos can actually briefly fly. So basically they're saying that this study discovered that whenever hippos move at full speed on land, all 4 of their feet are regularly in the air for brief moments. So technically they can fly for 0.3 seconds. McDonald's has now officially discontinued their salad offerings in America due to a lack of demand. So, Apple is now aiming to mass produce AirPods with cameras by 2026. They're saying that the reason why they're going to have cameras on the AirPod is so that it can enhance the spatial audio experience. So, for example, the camera could detect when your head moves and it could adjust the sound. So, Apple is now also officially classifying the iPhone X and the first generation AirPods as vintage. So these products are so old that here's the official list of all the Apple products that are vintage, which is literally crazy. The iPhone 4 is reasonable, but the rest of them? If you don't want to forget about the meteor shower, there's going to be a double meteor shower happening on July the 30th. So if you want to make sure you don't miss it, I will give you a reminder, so make sure you add me. And by the way, I'm also going to be live streaming this entire event on TikTok, so if you don't want to miss it, you can also just come to that and we're all going to watch it together, so make sure you don't forget.